Mr. Mayor, at 7 o'clock.
Okay. I will call the February 20th meeting to order. And I want to mention a couple of things just for us for remembrance. But we have a ordinance on decorum that we have said we would try to address a little bit better this year as far as one person speaking at a time. So I just want to remind us of that for a couple of meetings, so we will. Also, just for the record, when we have public presentation, that is a time for the citizens to come speak to us. And I'm going to try to start enforcing that a little bit to let them know it's their time to speak to us, but we don't have a debate period. And also, there's been a little bit of talk about the interruptions from the audience. And there is an ordinance, a state law actually, that addresses public interference with a meeting, so forth. Normally, how that's handled is if the presiding officer thinks something's out of line, then they can call it out of line. If a council member thinks it is, they can also bring it to the attention. And then, you know, if it's not too bad, everything is acceptable. If it gets a little bit out of line, then I'm going to probably look towards the chief. But I'll try to make that call and be as gracious as I can. But at the same time, we're here to have a public meeting for the town council or to have a council meeting in the public. So it's important that we listen to the public when they speak, and then when we're speaking, they allow us to too. But if we can just remember those few little points, it'll help us kind of go through the meeting a little bit quicker and faster and a little bit more professional. And all that, next is...
Are you saying that you don't want the public to comment on anything that we do, or
like I said, we are having a council meeting, and when we have a council meeting, we're here to vote on the stuff on the agenda.
I'm talking about during the public participation part.
They can talk during that time, yes, but we don't answer questions, we don't debate. It's just a time for them to speak and let us know whatever it is they feel on something on the agenda that night, or if it's later, how they feel about any particular subject. But it's not a time for us to debate, because it's not set up for that. It's time for us to listen.
But you're saying you don't want them to, you don't want to admonish the people for showing their appreciation for something, or clapping, or...
If it gets to a point that it's interrupting us from hearing, then yes, I'm going to call it and ask the chief to quiet them down, because we're here to have our meeting as well. And if there's a lot of interruptions going on in the audience we can't hear, then that's not conducive to our meeting. There's a time and a place for everything, and you know.
But I mean, what I want to make sure I'm clear about is you're saying that you don't want the people to say anything during our meeting as far as agreeing with something, or
did y'all hear me say
going or not agreeing with something.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I said that. I said I want it to be more in order, and I will call
That's
that.
That's what I'm saying. What's in order? What's going to be in order?
We'll put it on the agenda for next month and discuss it. I'm just bringing it up right now.
Well, if you're bringing it up, I want to make sure they understand and I'm clear about it, so there's no confusion, and you don't have to admonish anybody out in public.
It's on the recording, so you can watch it a couple times and figure out what I'm saying, but I think it's pretty evident. Anyway, the next thing on the agenda is Pledge of Allegiance and Invocation, and I will recognize Councilman Walker to lead us in those.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. God, please bless this council and the things that we do. Amen.
Next item is the reading of the minutes from February 6th. Is there a motion for approval?
I make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor then of approving the minutes as written, do so with show of hand. Next is the administrative briefing. Anything, Mr. Brown, you need to add?
Just one thing, Mr. Mayor. As a reminder here, the annual Municipal Association Conference will be July 19th, 22nd in Hilton Head. I need you all to start thinking about whether you're going to attend or not, and also if you want to take any special classes, which we normally have the day before on the 18th, and we normally pay for it. So
Okay.
probably going to get that information from you by the end of March, middle of April at the latest.
Any questions of Mr. Brown on the briefing? Seeing none, next is the code enforcement update. Oh.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
how are y'all?
good.
A little different face, not as good looking. That being said, Officer Stokes' mother has the flu. He has a full-time job of taking care of her. His part-time job is here, and she's got the flu right now. So just keep that in your thoughts if you don't mind. Hopefully he doesn't get it, but hopefully she gets better too. Just going over the January code enforcement report. We had a total of 171 cases that we investigated, watch-long entries. And we kind of geared up for the front yard parking. 35 of those 171 were related to that. And then at the same time, we were kind of brought into the enforcement response for the illicit discharge for the stormwater drain compliance for town. As you're well aware, I think Director Klein gave you an update on that on the last meeting. And I'll go a little bit more in depth about our response plan and on the next couple slides. But just to give you a breakdown of the numbers that we had, just for January, we investigated 9 total unsightly violations. One of those is still active, trying to get it cleaned up. 11 conditions for collection, which all those are in compliance now. A lot of times that has to do with bulk items or something out by the road that Tyler may not know to pick up. So either we call them or we ask the resident to call them. Vehicle violations, we had 23. 3 of those are still active. Most of those are related to either a tag that's expired or doesn't have a tag. And the reason why those might still be active is because they were written late in January, and they either are still, well, they couldn't be within their grace period still, but there might be some reason, a DMV holdup or something, why they might still be active. We had about 8 total business checks. Those are made during their patrols, and sometimes citizens will call or email in complaints about those, and we'll respond to those. The entire department took up 37 signs that were in violation. Those might have been by the road or somewhere they weren't supposed to be. Only 2 animal complaints, which is pretty good. Some months we have 8, 10 dogs running at large. So this month was just barking dog nuisance and another dog running at large in New Friars Gate. 2 zoning violations. That's for, one was for not having a zoning permit, and the other was for not having a container. So those pods that you see, you have to have a permit through the town. Vi handles all that with the town hall. And she does a really good job of communicating with us and giving us the proper documentation. I mean, we won't even have to ask her, and she's shooting us emails saying who's got one and who's squared away. Thanks, Vi. And then the dilapidated property, we had 2 of those, and those were houses. One was related to gutters, and the other's still pending for the garage door to get fixed.
Can I ask something on
Yeah, go ahead.
The collections?
Conditions for collection.
And you said most of it was bulk item, but is Tyler, say if they're riding down the road picking up whatever, and they see yard trash out there and it's too big, they're supposed to tag that and let the owner know to cut it up, do whatever they're supposed to do. Do they have to tag the appliances and the mattresses and all that kind of stuff too?
I don't know the details as far as the contract. The town administrator might be able to go into the details for what they're supposed to tag or that kind of thing. I can tell you as a citizen of the town, I haven't had an issue with anything being picked up, but that's just me.
I mean, as far as you calling and getting stuff picked up? Or,
Right,
yeah.
right. Or just, I mean, I've got 3 boys, so we have a lot of boxes, like, from whatever might come in. And if we put it out by the road, they're getting it. I've never had an issue, yard debris or anything. But I do see sometimes the what the citizens might complain about. I have seen that where they might miss something, or they might just not have known about it and they're not picking something up. And that's, I get to see that firsthand because of the code enforcement job. So,
Well, Bob, is Tyler supposed to tag that stuff like the mattress and I'm gonna call it the wash machine? If they ride down the road, are they supposed to tag that and let the people know they got a call, or do they just?
Tag it, but most of the time they call us and they ask if we're gonna give them permission to go pick it up.
Oh, so they call you or call us or whatever, okay.
The big items, you see a mattress laying out there,
So Tyler will call you, or the owner will call you, the homeowner?
normally it's Tyler.
Oh, okay. And ask if they can pick it up?
They won't pick it up that day, they'll say that we have a mattress here, we can't pick it up, but you need to have it scheduled. You
Oh,
want us to schedule
okay.
for our next pickup.
Oh, okay.
Once a week, maybe every 10 days.
Okay.
Take your pickup, pick up mattresses, dressers, box springs, big items, you have to have a special day to pick
But
up.
they don't know just to do it I mean, they can't schedule it themselves?
No.
So they call you to get you to schedule it?
They charge us, they need my permission.
Oh, okay. Okay. Go ahead.
all right, so that was the breakdown slide. If everybody good on that one? The front yard parking discussion of the 35 that we addressed, some of the properties had multiple vehicles that were parked. By the way, that picture was something I Googled today. It's out of North Carolina. It's not in town. Apparently, Greensboro, North Carolina has the same problem. Officers attempted to contact with the residents, but a lot of times they might just not be home. So we leave a copy of the new ordinance on the window, and we note it in the database exactly what vehicle it was placed on, so that we have some kind of tracking to look back on if we need to later on.
Well, do y'all try to go back the next week or sometime to?
It just depends, Mr. Mayor. What I'm getting ready to talk to you about on the illicit discharge that has been brought up recently has taken a lot of our time. So we're just kind of breaking the ice on the front yard parking ordinance. We're trying to get into a groove. We're trying to get into a good method of where and how frequent. I've kind of implemented that our two officers try to enforce it between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. because we know a lot of people are probably home then, and that's when we're going to make contact with them and educate them. So we're trying to get that rolling.
Well, I just want to make sure, because if something's left on the door and
Nobody knows about it, yeah.
they claim later they
Right.
didn't, whatever, then the education period, so to speak, is lost.
Right. And we'll take that in consideration, down the road. It's not going to be one of those, here's your ticket. We'll take in consideration if somebody says they didn't get one. We, may have to look into that, because it could be between now and then a different resident at that property.
Yeah.
So, the next slide was the illicit discharge I was going to talk about, and our enforcement response. We've had a total of 5 cases that we've investigated. 4 are still pending in court, so I'm kind of limited on what I can speak about for the details. But we were first approached by Director Klein in early January. January 11th was the first investigation where we had to ticket a resident, and it was fixed the next day. When I say fixed, it was in compliance with the stormwater drain permit. January 16th, we had another resident, and that was fixed the next day. So a lot of these get fixed pretty promptly. There was a renter and homeowner situation on the 17th where we had to ticket the resident, and then found out through investigation that it was pretty much the homeowner's responsibility too, and that homeowner was ticketed and found accountable for it. That was fixed within a couple weeks on February 7th, and then 2 more in February. One of those is still pending. It's not fixed. It was brought up February 8th where we issued a ticket. There's a lot more in depth to that situation that I can't go into the details for. So, but like I said, most of the time, what we've gotten to is Director Klein will come to us. He's already done the investigation, and he comes to us, and we write the ticket, and we do that because of the public hazard of the illicit discharge. And then we haven't gone to court for it yet, but that'll be on the next report to give you the details on how
So
that.
you don't actually get involved until Witt has done and scooped up and done his
Yeah,
test or
that's
whatever,
it's.
and found out that there's illicit.
That's correct, and I think we're all on the same page as far as the chief, town administrator, and Director Klein, that we're just kind of, for lack of better terms, the bad guy. The investigation comes from Director Klein because he's responsible for the stormwater drain permit from Lexington County and DHEC. So when we get there, we just pretty much are making contact and saying, he's done the investigation, so we're the bad guy. So.
And there's 5 that's had well, 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like about 7. 4 are pending. The ones that we can't get on the property for whatever reason. If we have a letter from Carolina Water or Richland County Sewer that the people do not have sewer service, is that enough probable cause for us to get a warrant and go on that property and check it, or is that not enough?
The gatekeeper of probable cause is the judge, so I can't tell you definitively that it is enough probable.
And that would be like a circuit court judge, not Mickey, or would that be our judge?
I believe it will be Mickey.
Oh, okay.
He's just making a determination whether or not something is more probable or not. You can use hearsay testimony, like a statement from a third party, like the sewer provider, that it's been stopped up, and you had that coupled with some sort of evidence that the water was still running. I would think that that would be enough for me to believe there was probable cause to issue a warrant to search to see if there was an illicit discharge. But I can't say definitively since I don't get to make that decision.
Right.
I think we kind of handle this on a community-based level as far as if Director Klein says to me that there's 2 pit bulls in the backyard, I need to get over here. I could go to the door with him, knock on the door and say, listen, here's the deal. We need to check out and see if there's a problem here. If the resident says, get out of my face, then we could go to the aspect of getting a judge involved. That's probably going to be rare, though. When they realize that we're trying to help the situation, the neighbors and everything, we probably can get it handled.
And I have to ask, because I understand that there's some that we haven't been able to get on the property. Is that still true, or are we making any headway on those homes, or we're stuck?
Well, if we can't get in the backyard and we can't get on the property, we can't prove that there's an illicit discharge.
Right.
That's where the problem is, because you can't smell it, you can't see it, and you have to get back there to check out. So, help me out. Johnny.
I've got 3 homes that people are living in that do not have sewer service, for sure. And
But we don't know if they're discharging it.
I don't know if they're discharging it, correct.
You don't know if it's a septic,
There's no septic.
Yeah.
there is no
All-
septic.
This is all Carolina Water Service customers.
So those
Cut off.
3, you would have to get the police to go with you, and then if they allow it, fine. If they don't, then we'd have to come back to go to and see.
Yeah, and he came to me today about one that we're actually going to go to first thing in the morning and knock on the door and try to make contact.
Okay. But that'll give us an avenue if something doesn't work. We
In a
just,
lot of cases, they may be dropping it under the house. So
God help us.
you can't see it from the outside.
right. But it's got to come out sometime, somewhere.
One of them I call it a stormwater test. So when it rains, it comes out to the street, and I can collect a water sample, take it, and that proves where it's coming from. And that's when we took to the resident and got them to hook up with that test. So we can do that, but with that, you're still relying on the rain. So it
Yes.
hasn't rained in 2 weeks, so can't get a sample when it's not raining.
And is everything we're doing, in your opinion, Eric, suitable if EPA comes in and says, hey, y'all ain't doing enough? Are we,
Speak for the EPA.
do you think we're doing enough? Could we argue our point that we've done everything we can other than whatever.
I could tell you that I spoke with the Lexington County Stormwater Drain, I guess you call her a supervisor, and actually Officer Stokes had her on speakerphone in front of me, and I think we've kind of gone above and beyond compared to some other municipalities in Lexington County, because we were just asking for what their enforcement response was, and listening to what she said, we're Director Klein's right on track, and the police department, I think, is doing a pretty good job with backing him on it. So.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
Eric, in the case of what Director Klein has just said, that there are 3 that we know are not hooked up to the sewer system, is that enough to go to the judge and say, can we get there? Yes.
Yes, you can utilize hearsay evidence, which is what you're talking about, the evidence of an out of court or out of a third party coming to add to the person's, the affiant's knowledge. And so that officer or wit would come to the judge and they fill out a piece of paper that says, I have received documentation from Carolina Water that says the sewer system is turned off at this address. I've also confirmed with the City of Columbia that this address continues to receive running water at this address, and it is occupied. And based off of all of those things, it leads me to believe that if there is not already presently an illicit discharge, there will be in the very near future. And so I'd like to check. And that's what you're trying to do, is show to the judge that something is more probable than not that a violation is occurring. And then if the judge is convinced that something is more probable than not, then he would sign off on that, and then you would have the right, even above objection, to go in and do the inspection. That's the crux of it.
So can we do those with those 3 properties?
I don't know what the nature of the evidence we have is, but I assume if we have all of those things, you can ask the judge. But again, the judge is your gatekeeper. So
Understood.
yeah, I mean, he gets to make the final
Understood.
call.
But again, from being questioned by the EPA on something like this, I think it would be important if we can prove that we've taken it to that step of actually going to a judge. If the judge denies it, that's another issue. But at least in the EPA's eyes, the town has done what they needed to do.
Bobby's got it right in terms of expedience. I mean, 9 times out of 10, you're going to find that most suspected offenders are not going to deny you access. And obviously, if you get consent, you don't need to make a probable cause showing or get a warrant. You get access by consent. And so that is the pathway of least resistance and the most expedient. Obviously, I would promote that pathway over getting a warrant any day. But
Yes.
if it has to get to the point of getting a warrant and you've addressed them and they won't give you consent, my experience has been there's smoke that typically is fire.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
All right. Just a couple of discussion items I was going to bring up with council. I think we left that slide out, but I was going to ask that the council consider the frequency of providing the report, the code enforcement report. Maybe consider a quarterly report instead of monthly. That way we can give you a more detailed information related to cases that cannot be brought up due to their pending statuses. So like the illicit discharges, I can't really talk about those. They're pending cases. And then next month, there might be something else that's a hot topic that we don't even talk about those anymore. So I think we can give a little more detailed report if it was done quarterly. I don't know how y'all want to decide that, or if town administrator has any insight on that. And then additionally, I'd request the line item on the agenda to be changed to community services report, not code enforcement report. The reason for that is code enforcement is a majority of what the division handles, but you as council may be more informed what the duties the division accomplishes on a daily basis, such as child seat safety inspections, community relations, coffee with a cop. I just left a neighborhood watch organization meeting that 2 of the council members were present at. That was put on by a citizen of Coatesworth named Wade Deloche. He's trying to organize for the entire town a neighborhood crime watch. So he had about 20, 25 people there, so it was a pretty good turnout. We also do victim services, and just recently the grant-funded DUI enforcement officer was put under the division also, so there could be an update for that as far as his enforcement efforts. So just a couple things that I was going to ask to consider. And I can provide you with that slide if you'd like. It's got the details on it. That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Next is amendments to the agenda. Any amendments to the agenda? Seeing none. Next is consideration of communications, and we have Ms. Sampson here to speak with us on the breast cancer walk and run.
Good evening, Mayor and Councilman. How are you
Good.
guys doing? Ms. Holland's going to hand you guys some information. We just wanted to give you an update kind of on what happened last year and what we want to do this year. So, as you guys know, in the middle is our nonprofit. We provide financial assistance to women going through breast cancer treatment in the Midlands. You guys have been gracious enough to grant us the park to use for our annual event. That's our fundraiser. Last year we did the fundraiser. It was July 1st. Sorry, I had to get the date right. And I don't know if you remember or not, but unfortunately that weekend it was very rainy. And so we had planned a barbecue event, but all of the barbecue vendors were outside vendors. So that became a problem in doing the barbecue portion. The race went off without a hitch, as it always does. Chief Perry was gracious enough to grant us police officers. We had no problems with the run. We had more participants than we've ever had as far as that goes. This year, though, we've decided to try to make it an all-day event in terms of trying to get more people to come to the park. And we've got Tammy going here with us, and she's with Manchester Farms. So they've agreed we're going to do what's called In the Middle Summer Festival. So we will have the race in the morning at 8 o'clock like we always do, followed by the barbecue from 11 to 2. And then from 5 to 9, she will take over, and we will have a food and wine event. That's like a farm-to-table event. There's been a lot of excitement about that in terms of we don't have one. Charleston has something similar, but Columbia doesn't have anything like it. So far we've gotten, I believe, 2 restaurants committed, but we needed a date before we could really get anybody to commit. We'll have food and wine. I've checked about getting the permits and all of that. And because we're a nonprofit, we're able to do that as long as we have everybody's approval to do so. So we just wanted to come talk to you guys about getting a commitment for the date that we'd like to use, which is June 29th, 30th. Am I lying? I don't have my calendar in front of me. So it's that Saturday, June 30th. And that would be this year. If we could do that, then we would be able to go ahead and start getting some of the more specifics with the event, because we couldn't do it without the date. The only thing that would change between what we had gotten last year and this year would be that we are adding the food and wine portion. And that would be, like I said, from 5 to 9. Open to any question you guys may have about that.
Is those dates available, Bob? Did you know?
Don't know off the top of my head. We'll be able to check tomorrow.
Now, do you need the shelters or just the amphitheater?
We take the whole area because the shelter, the one that is down by the playground, we use for registration for the race in the morning, and the seating. This year, by adding the food and wine and also the barbecue, people besides the amphitheater, places to sit, people need somewhere to go to sit. We do use the amphitheater for the bands. They will have 3 bands, 2 probably for the barbecue and 1 for the food and wine. But again, we won't be able to get those particulars until we have the date in place. We usually have a DJ and bands, which we had in place for last year. Anything else?
Yeah, I think Bob can check tomorrow, I guess, on the dates and confirm.
And I think it's never been a problem in the past. If we need to leave one, that's not a problem for us.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
Sounds good. Sounds like it's expanding a little bit, and I appreciate y'all picking Irmo to do your event.
Oh, we love having it here, you guys. It's great. It's great in and out, and Chief Barry always helps us with the police. We've not had any problems with the Friars Gate, which I'm proud to say because I thought we would have issues because we basically have to shut down part of Old Friars Gate to do the race because the race does go, the course is certified, so we can't change it. So it has to go through, and we do a good job, I think, of going to the neighborhood the week before. We hand out flyers. Nicole and I go. We have particular flyers just for that neighborhood so that they know the times that we're going to kind of be there. And we haven't had any complaints. People are pretty good about not driving through. I mean, at 8 in the morning on a Saturday, I don't think many people are wanting to go in and out anyway. But we haven't had any complaints to you all, I don't think, not that I know of. And last time I asked just to make sure, and we didn't have any. So I don't anticipate that being a problem this year.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need us to approve anything, Bob, or do you need us to get approval from us on anything, or is this okay?
And next is, we have the Oak Strut budget, and you're there.
I'm here. I'm here. Yeah, I do want you to approve something for me tonight if you can. Council members, thank you very much for the time on the agenda tonight. We met as a commission last Tuesday and approved this proposal to you and asked for you to consider and approve this budget for us for 2018. The expenses that we budget for 2018 are generally the same expenses as we had in 2017, increased a little bit for inflation with two exceptions. There are two of them that go a little bit more. Some of these budget numbers have kind of held steady for a number of years, and so most of these expense areas are just a anticipation increases of just cost. The two that went up more than that are the hired law enforcement dollars. Captain Dennis told us that there is an increase of the cost that we're going to have to pay for Lexington County for sheriff's deputies. That's just something they're doing at the sheriff's department. The other one that's up sizably is the entertainment budget. Our feeling is this: we feel that, we had by any measure a very successful festival in 2017. In 2017, we added our second night. To cement that into our two-day festival, we need a solid headline entertainer Saturday night that's going to bring people out. Again, this is something new, getting people out on Saturday night. So it was successful last year, but we also want to make sure that people are coming Saturday night, and that's the reason for our somewhat increase of the entertainment budget in our request for you. The overall budget is $2,300 higher than the revenue we received last year. So just about 2% increase over the actual revenue that we brought in. And we're going to ask, it's essentially what we're asking. We've run some surpluses, some accumulated surpluses over the last few years of the festival. So we're doing okay in terms of making it financially sound. It was last year. It has been the year before. We really want to invest that money back into the festival this year by way of increasing the visibility of the Saturday night entertainment. So that is our proposal and what we ask you for. I'm glad to answer any questions that you have.
I do. I have three questions.
Okay, sir.
Up on the booth rentals, and it may be the way you broke it down, but in 2017 you had 18,000, and actually 10,000 came in plus the privilege fees. And I don't know if you just broke it down
right
different this year instead of putting it all together, or
We moved it. It made better sense to us to try to separate it between essentially the food vendors and then everybody else, exhibitors, businesses, in the festivals. That was more, we had in the prior budget a line for booth fees and a line for privileges and privilege fees. And at the end of the day, we weren't getting good reporting on that because people are paying their booth fee and their privilege fee in one check. So that's how the food vendors were sending in the money. So the numbers weren't, we weren't managing anything with them. So this was a way to isolate the food vendors and their booth fees, their electric fees, their privilege fees, to check that the food vendors right.
So that
and then everybody
privilege
else.
fee is actually just for the food vendors. The booth rental is for everybody else.
That's
okay.
right.
Okay. The other question I want to ask, and Bob might need to clarify this one more, and I know we had spoke about it, but I went back to being confused again. So under the transfer from the general account for last year, we had 34,337, but that was actually for 2 years.
That's correct, because we did two last year in 2017.
We did a 10,000 and a 20-some thousand.
Correct. The advisory committee met in February, and we realized that was really a bad time because all the other advisory committees for the county meet in September. So we did another one in September, but for the rest of the money that we had received from the state. So they actually received two checks. They received 10,000 one in February and 24,000, both approved by council.
Right. But if we do
And next year it'll just be
in September, but we'll probably just have 24,000 or something at that one. So we may not have the 34 or the 31. We may just have whatever is available, the 24. And I know up there at the Richland County, we're still dealing with them. If you don't get the 10,000, and if you only get 24,000 instead of 31 for us, or 25 or 26 or some number there, y'all going to be able to do an adjustment or just pull from that reserve?
Yes, I think we can adjust some on the fly. It's difficult for us, obviously, to try to budget at this point where we've got to do our purchases and line up a festival when it's not going to be till September that we're actually going to know that number. So I don't know a good solution to it. I mean, we're
Well, let me ask this. If we do an allocation in September for next year, then you kind of know what you got. If we just said, okay, this September, whatever we allocate is for the 2019 budget, then you'd kind of know.
could be, I think, from the standpoint, I think at that point, a lot of times you're asking us what's our budget at that point. We're not going to know our 2019 budget in September either, so we're not going to be able to give you a whole lot of good guidance when you're trying to make a decision in September as well. I'm okay with it. From our perspective, it's easier for me to know that number in September for the prior year to make the budget, but I don't know how that'll work in September standing before you guys.
Okay.
Slumping before you guys in September. We're kind of tired at that time of the year, but.
And is any word from Richland County?
We're in discussion. We believe, Council or Commissioner Hardy is working on this and has kept me updated. We've put together a request today to them to reconsider the deadline for us. Our understanding is that, and again, I don't really know their process, but that we were somewhat earmarked for funding this year. And so at the same time, after our meeting, we said, Commissioner Hardy, would you go ahead and get that application out to Richland County? And she made the to Bob in Richland County. Same time they sent out literally the same day saying, we're wondering why you guys didn't apply for a grant this year. So caught us all by surprise, but we're working on that. And we believe that they're, we're certainly putting out a request for them today to reconsider the deadline for us.
And I'm guessing you're going with the 10 that you're asking.
That's correct.
Did they imply when they were talking that they were going to do 10 or 6? Did they?
I don't know that one.
Okay.
I don't know that.
And the only other question I had was, under donation scholarships, the 2017 actual was 4,100, and I know you put 10 back in there, but we haven't been really.
I'm sorry?
We haven't been really doing anything. So if you lose some of that money, can you just say, instead of 10,000 to donations, we're going to go back to 4,000?
Yes.
Is that where some of your?
Clearly, the money that we put into donations and services or whatever we're going to do in the year is completely dependent on how successful the festival is. What the funding is, and that's certainly going to be a piece of how successful the funding is.
And I guess my last question would be, we're going from 26,000 to 40,000 for entertainment. Is that still? We had 2 bands last year for 26. Can't we get 2 bands this year for 26?
Yeah.
Or 30?
We're it kind of stuns me as I start asking prices and getting prices. Believe me, this still isn't the Rolling Stones. Okay, we're not. No, don't expect them. But again, getting up into the name bracket, it's pretty surprising. These are Saturday nights. Saturday night in September is a pretty big time. They've got other opportunities. So you'll see people, some fairly good names, for instance, you're hitting the Newberry Opera House. If you look at it kind of carefully, it's almost always on a Thursday night or something, and they're on their way someplace else. So we, unfortunately, on Saturday night become the someplace else. And that's where our, a lot of these tabs. So I think we did well last year. I mean, I think, bang for the buck, I think we did very well. We're looking for people that are going to have enough name to get people out. They're going to know the name, and they're going to come, oh, look, we can go out and see them at the Ochre Strut Saturday. So that's what we're aiming. We've got some names that we're considering. We still don't have them. Obviously, we have to have a budget in place before we get too very far with these guys.
If they came on Friday, would they be cheaper?
Generally, no. Wednesday or Thursday's cheap.
Oh, okay.
Friday or Saturday isn't.
Well, that's all my questions.
Do you find, Larry, that you have enough time presenting this budget now? I'm wondering if you should start a year for bands, or do they wait? I just want your feeling on that. Are we giving you enough time to do what you need to do here?
So far, so good. I mean, when you think about it, we're just really a few months, past the festival. We don't find many of these guys are even opening up their books significantly until January 1st. That's what we have found.
Okay.
So we've started conversations. We've started asking people who's available when, but mostly that all starts the ticker in January. And again, we've got feelers out here, with bands, who's available. We don't have any holes on anybody right yet, so people we're looking at could be booked by the time I get to them, but that's just part of what we got. We got more than one name. So,
how long does it take after the festival to close out your books, to know exactly where you stand?
Mr. Brown might get a little angry for me on that one. So, routinely, yeah, routinely these books are closed out. The income is closed pretty quickly after the festival. The expenses are, they're just, generally we have bills, but then there's just the odd things that get bounced back.
But these are small for the most part, aren't they?
Generally, that's correct, yes, sir.
Right? These are the lagging issues that have come up. So, I mean, you have a pretty good idea in the end of October?
Be honest
November?
With you, I feel like we have honestly, I think we have a doggone good idea, in my opinion, certainly by October, but there's still, mostly because there are things that I know are going to come, both income and expenses, that we just haven't seen yet. but we still have a pretty good idea of where we stand. By the time we get,
They're not surprised, Mark. It's just that I hate to be paying bills this far after the open.
Sure.
We knew they were coming. They were all
right,
Sure,
tracking stuff.
sure. I'm just thinking though that we should try and provide you with as much time. I would love for us to have this settled so January 1 you can shop for bins. I would think that's going to give you the best choice of what's out there, especially if that's what you're doing. I think
fair enough.
that's all I'm saying.
Fair enough.
To give you the best opportunity to be successful.
Sure.
And Bob actually gives him a budget earlier based on kind of an average of all this. And then they kind of look at it and decide, well, we need more money. And then, of course, it's really not actually approved in March when we do. Yeah. So that when we do our budget process, we know, okay, here's how much they want, here's
Sure.
how much we got to put in.
Sure.
But yeah, we could look at it, I guess, in November sometime or something. And it's amazing. I mean, I own a small business, and when somebody's through 5 days, I want them to come pick up and pay me. Some of these people are like 2 or 3 months later. I don't know why they don't want their money, why they don't bill. I don't know. I've told Bob before we ought to just say, if you don't get it here by December 31st, you're not paying you. But
The difference in private business, if I owe you money and you don't ask me for it for 6 months, I got no problem with that. I got to be honest
Yeah.
with you.
But I'm surprised they wait around and turn in bills.
And some of them, for instance, there really was one that just came in, but it was because they thought they had charged it, thought it had been paid, and it was just a result of finding it had not gone the right way. So,
Any more questions? Thank you.
okay.
Can you accept the question from a citizen to this man, Mr. Mayor, or not? Can a citizen ask this man a question now or not?
Yeah, after the meeting, sure.
You can ask them privately,
I
but
have
we're through. We're going to move on.
I have
Oh, you got a question? Oh, you got a consideration.
on Thursday this week, I'm going to hold a town hall meeting in this chambers, and I would like to invite all the citizens that are interested in different items that we been kicking around on Facebook and around town to come and discuss those things. These are items that are not dealing with parking. These are items that generally that you want us to work on or to look at as a council, and we can sit around and talk about it as a civil town. And I'm invited the police department to have a representative here to help us answer any questions. Again, this will be on Thursday at 6 o'clock in these chambers. And I invite any council members that want to attend to let Bob know so we can let the appropriate people know that they're going to have it. This will be on Thursday at 6 o'clock this week.
And I know I've got somewhere to go, so I know I won't be able to be there. But one thing I wanted to bring up too, a clarification for the record. At our last meeting, during the consideration of communications, there was a comment made in regards to a individual in town who had been written a parking in the yard ticket and was not being able to be reimbursed because they were a renter and moved out of town or something. But for the record, I have checked with the chief and Bob and the courts. No one has been issued a ticket for parking in the yard, and none of the tickets that were written that had to do with the street parking, they were all voided. So I'm not sure the information that was given to the lady wasn't correct or what, but we have not issued any ticket and no one is paid. And if someone had paid a ticket, regardless of whether they lived in town or not, the judge is the only one that can handle that. We can't, whatever. But I just want to clarify that there has not been a ticket written on the yard parking as a date. No one's been charged and no one's paid. So I do want that on the record so we can clarify that. Any other considerations of communications? Seeing none. Next is presentation by citizens. This is where anyone who wants to address council on anything on the agenda may do so at this time. All we ask is you give us your name and address for the record.
And I hope you would enforce that consistently. I'm happy to give my name and address, but I would hope you enforce that consistently among the citizens, Mr. Mayor. George Glassmeyer, 100 Denbeck Road. I want to address two items that are on the agenda. The first one is item 7B, the proposed 2018 Okerstrut budget that was just discussed. I have a question. I understand this can't be a debate, but I can certainly present my question to you, and you folks can consider my question and perhaps look into it. Although this is not perhaps the most ideal way to address this, and we certainly don't get prompt resolution, I want to air my question. If you'll go back and look at the information that the gentleman from the Okerstrut just provided you on the line item budget under expenses, there's an item there for law enforcement. Now, as the chief will tell you, there are two components to the law enforcement expenditure for the Okerstrut. The one component is the overtime of the chief's officers, the Irmo police officers, their overtime, and it has to be expended to get them there at that location. And there's also the expense for Lexington County Sheriff's deputies to be there to augment Irmo police. Those are different items. I've asked this question to probably 5 different people and got 5 different answers on this, and I want a definitive answer as to that item on your accounting there. Does that include the Lexington County, the Irmo police overtime, or both? Because if the answer that I get most consistently is that it only includes the expenditure for the Lexington County Sheriff's deputies, not the overtime budget for the police department, and that money is in the chief's annual budget, which makes the profitability shown on this questionable and illusory. I think every expense that's incurred by that Okerstrut needs to be on that budget that's on that sheet in front of you, all the law enforcement from all agencies, and I'm not satisfied that's what's happening, and I would love to get a definitive answer in front of God and everybody from whoever knows that.
I will get one later.
Thank you. No, we can't have a debate. We're following the rules here.
All right.
Not a discussion. It's for me to make presentations. I have the floor. We're going to have rules. Let's enforce them. The next thing I want to talk about is item 10 under new business, the approval to contract for rebuilding the front porch on the Irmo Town Hall to the tune of $38,000 plus. I've got a number of questions about this. First of all, what's the extent of the damage? How was it caused? What's the extent of the repairs? Have bids been let out to this? And what are the various bids on this? And then that takes me to my next concern. That building is older than, I dare say, anybody in this room, even Councilman Waits. So do we want to spend $38,000 to repair a porch on a building that's that old when you could take that same $38,000 and put another patrolman on the road for a year in this town? And if you look at the porch, it wraps around that building. A lot of that porch isn't walked on from day to day and doesn't need to be walked on. Can we narrow the necessary repair to just the steps going up to the front door, and if need be, block off the rest of the porch to save some money here? I'm not real keen on spending $38,000 to fix a porch. No more interested than I was in spending $30,000 for this video system that I continue to be unimpressed with. So I would ask that council look into all those issues and ask those questions when this item comes up on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Next is second reading of Ordinance 18-2, which has to do with the floodplain manual, changing the wording. Is there a motion for second reading?
I so move.
And a second.
Second.
Any discussion? And again, we're just doing a word change in here, basically, to meet somebody's requirements. To change it from land development to flood prevention. Any discussion? All in favor then, do so a show of hands. Next item is new business. This is an approval to do the porch for rebuilding the front porch on Town Hall in either wood or composite, not to exceed $38,705. And the reason Bob put it on there like that is because we had multiple bids, and so we just put on there the high one. But that is just the high one. It's not 38 plus, it's just no more than 38. Y'all have a sheet that we was given and also an updated where a couple of the composites have been taken off. Oh, I don't know, did I? No, you're right. So is there a motion for approval? Not to exceed 38. And it can be one of the lower ones.
In order to discuss it, I so move.
All right.
And I second.
So, Councilman Waits, I'll let you go first, and then Mark.
Well, we have 5 bids, and of the 5 bids, only 2 gave a bid for composite versus wood. It is in bad condition in some areas, and I'd hate to see a citizen walk up the steps to pay a fine and end up suing the town for more than the fine.
Can we get that new one on the screen?
It's on.
No, that's the old
Oh,
one.
that's the old one.
Okay, okay.
All right, well,
That's the old one, and 2 of them, like I said, withdrew their bids.
the old one, First Class Construction has dropped their $15,000 bid, and Southern has dropped their $14,000 bid, so they're not going to bid on a composite. Stephen Johnson has given a bid on composite of $27,950, so that's the only change from that particular one that was just up and has disappeared.
Well, we can put it back up with the old stuff and just, yeah, and that way people will know what the 2 bids, the 15 and 14 are no good.
The 15,342, the 14,300 are gone. They're not going to bid on it, for the composite part. And Stephen Johnson has bid $27,950. So we've only got 2 that are complete bids for wood and or composite. We have some rotting wood, and of course wood's going to rot. I've used composite at my house around the bottom of door facings, the brick mold around the garage door. I got tired of replacing it. Even if you painted all sides and didn't even have it touching the ground but caulked between it, it would still rot. Composite's good stuff, but it's also a little bit more expensive. But the work does need to be done. And I've heard some good things about Mr. Johnson. I don't know anything about the Phoenix group, and Mr. Johnson is local, and since I've lived in Irmo, even before I was on council, I always like to get people local to do business with. So I don't see any problem with spending $15,000 to fix the whole thing. Just the question is, how long has that porch lasted, Bob, from the last time it was done?
It's 28 years old.
I won't be here for the next one, so let's go. I think it's well spent because, I mean, it is the town hall, and it is a historic building, although it's not on the National Register, which would save some money maybe.
I don't know. Normally, you put something on the National Register, you have to spend a lot of money.
You got to do
make
it
sure
their way.
Everything is done their way. Are you done?
Yes.
All right. I just want to say that I agree with Councilman Waits. The work has to be done. I think it's important that we do have the town hall. I think it's a beautiful building. I know it's one of the things that my wife and I noticed immediately when we came here. A lot of Southern charm in that building. It's not just a brick building that has no character to it. I think that that porch adds a lot to it. And again, this is Irmo. It's not Columbia. I think it gives a nice presentation. Now, even though it's double, I believe composite is the way to go. I think you pay for this thing once, and you don't pay for it again. I mean, that's my feeling. I'd much rather spend $27,900 or $28,000 than the $39,000.
You want
I want to hear you guys talk.
My opinion is if the wood lasts 29 years for $15,510, if the 28,000 lasted, whatever 29 twice is 28, it'd be 56 years, then I would say, hey, go for it. I don't know that it'll last 56 years. I don't know. I think you had mentioned, somebody said it may be 40 years.
That was a guy from the Phoenix group, but again, they have no detailed records to prove that. That's just, the manufacturers saying, well, we built this pretty good and it should hold up through all the sunlight and weather and last and not crack.
Yeah, because I think all of it, sooner or later, everything deteriorates, but I'm sure it does last longer. I just don't know how much longer. If that wood will last another 28 years, in my mind, I'm kind of, that's $500 a year based on the other thing. The other one is $1,000 a year, so to speak, or whatever. But my suggestion would be to go for the 15,510, but that's just me. Councilman Walker, what do you think?
Exactly what is broke with the stairs? Is it the stairs or is it the porch itself, Bob?
No, it's the porch itself. The rails are not up to code. I mean, they're 24 inches tall and the code is 36 inches, so because it was built so long ago.
Right.
So that is a safety if somebody were to fall over or something like that, we'd be in violation, code violation. Other than that, it's just the spindle from the bottom of the posts that are attaching to the deck that are all rotten. Just rotted wood.
Yeah.
Poke your finger through it.
So you're talking about cosmetically, it's things that need to be fixed, and the rise of the stairs is not in code, is what you're saying.
The stairs are fine, but we would change the stairs to have the same appearance as the rails.
The handrails.
Rails on the porch. The stairs don't have spindles that are engraved or grooved.
Right.
They're just straight.
But the rise of the stairs is in code?
That's correct.
So what's not in code? You're saying that something's not in, the deck itself is not in code?
The railings on the deck.
That railing that
The
goes,
railing that goes around it?
yeah, keeps you from falling off.
So you're saying that in order to raise the railing up, we have to replace the entire porch?
You have to replace the posts because the posts are decorative and they come here and they square off with a rail that are 24 inches. So if you try to just straighten it up 36, you're in the middle of where it's circle. It's not flat all the way up to where you would put a 36-foot rail.
Yeah, I think
So
we,
we're made for the 24-inch.
I think for $15,000, we can find a better solution than that. It's something that's decorative. It's nothing that's gonna, when you say it's gonna, somebody's gonna get hurt, I thought it was somebody's gonna walk on the porch and fall through and end up in the basement or something. And it's not the case. You're saying that it's an ornamental thing. It's not right.
And
Well,
it's
it's
Something that's,
It's not truly decorative because the posts are right at the bottom. At some point, they're going to fall out. Yeah, and the roof could collapse. Somebody could lean on it, and the thing could swing out and fall, and
yeah.
they're gone, and we're sued.
Well, I think we can come up with a better solution than $15,000, to be honest with you. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's in it. It's something that's, somebody's gonna fall through tomorrow, from what you're telling me. Okay.
Well, the only solution is to either fix it or not fix it. That's it. There's no other in between. I think he bid it out twice.
Yeah.
So it's either we do something or not. And there's no in between. We can
Yeah,
either
but I
use the
mean-
wood or we can use the composite, but either
Well,
way.
it's even beyond that. I mean, you're saying that the actual railing itself is
Yeah,
not, that part is not,
That stuff
it's
there.
rotting. And to replace the railing to be the right height,
And the post.
right, you're saying that's gonna cost $15,000.
Well, you have a big cost when you have the railings that go around the two corners. They've got to be
That's what I'm saying. Now you're getting into ornamental things. Okay.
That's where the main cost
Yeah.
to get around the corners and the cost of spindles. There's a lot of spindles out there.
And if you look at them real close, where the railing comes into the post, you could tell where somebody's done a lot of putty work, where it's rotted, and when they painted it, they just filled it up with caulking, and, I mean, you can go up there right now and just push it. But there's nothing anymore left of that railing to repair.
Well, I think
It's
we
gotta
need
be
to.
torn
I think
off.
we need to. I think we need to investigate a little bit more and look at it. But I mean, whatever we want to do as a council, that's fine.
Well, Bob has looked at it, and it's up to us to either say fix it or don't fix it and let it go another year or two and fix it later. Do you think it'll go another year or two before? Yeah. So I'm gonna make a suggestion, and I'm gonna make a motion. It's been a motion on there to be not more than $38,705, that we award it to Stephen Johnson Construction in the amount of $15,500 for the wood. Is there a second?
Is that that's for the wood? Is that for the
Yeah, the
construction
wood.
in the wood?
Yeah, that's for his labor, wood, material, and everything.
Okay.
So that would be an amendment, 15,510. And is there a second? If there's no second,
I'll second that.
Any discussion about that? And the only reason I'm doing that is I think something needs to be done. If I knew more about that composite, I would say go with the composite. I just don't know a whole lot about it. I do know just the makeup of stuff and plastics and all that stuff. And they break down too. I work on some stuff in my shop that people bring to me that's made out of the plastics, not the composite, but the plastic outdoor lawn furniture. I got a little plastic chair sitting out there now that's almost dust because the sunlight and the heat will break it down. And I'm sure the composite does too, but it doesn't break down like pure plastic does, but I don't know. I know that Trex decking lasts a long time. I just don't know if this stuff is the same as that. I don't know that much about it. We may pay $28,000 and get something to last 50 years, or it may last 39 years, 10 years. I don't know. If y'all know more about that than me, then I would, say go with it, and I would vote for that if it. But
When you say wood, is this pine? Is this oak? Is this cedar? What? I mean, what kind of wood is he putting?
most of it's probably going to be pine.
White pine.
Yeah, most of it would be.
Is this what we're thinking it is, or that's what it is? Or did they put it in the bid?
Well, most of that stuff that's at Lowe's typically is pine.
What did he put in the bid?
He did not put the type of wood in his.
Top rail is actually oak. It's a certain type of rail that you have to cut in so it curves.
You're Steve. Come up here and you can kind of explain some of this since you're the contractor.
The problem with the composites is there's only certain composites that I would offer to use. One of them is being Intex. Y'all can Google that, look it up on the computers and whatnot. They came out because they were doing historical stuff, and they were trying to find a product that is different than Trex. Trex only offers so much. You have to put it in a heat box and bend it. The Intex will actually bend it for you. So you get the measurements, you order it, they send it in, and it already has that radius on it. Mr. Walker, the handrail does need to be replaced. If you walk over there and look at it, it's deteriorated in somewhat. The building was moved there, and when they moved it, they actually just moved all the rails with it. Where I would have moved it, I would have replaced all the rails at that time. Also in the bid is to repair some wood floor that is actually rotted on the right side, and also that includes repainting the floor of the deck all the way across. Even though we had talked about it and that wasn't in a lot of people's bids, if you're going to replace one section, you might as well replace it. It would look a lot better, your front handrails coming down the rake
if you will, are different than what's on the actual deck. So it would look a lot better if it was all matching. I'm local, so I see it every day. It just looks better. You have people coming in, want to use commerce and stuff here. It just looks a lot better. Right now, it just looks dilapidated. And you're more than welcome to go over there and take a look at it. The top rail will be oak. It'll be an oak handrail. It has to be.
Top of the.
Yes, if you go with the wood, the top rail will be oak. The bottom will be pine. Your turn spindles will be pine. This will all be painted with an exterior paint. We get it from Sherwin-Williams locally. We also get everything will come from BMC, stock building supply, stuff like that. I mean, we try to use local, but steer's a little bit higher than everybody else when it comes to lumber.
Yes, they are.
So even though we like steer, we use steer a lot. They're pretty high on certain stuff. Your cost factor, I believe the original bid was $28,000 for wood or something like that. I'm the one that actually started the whole thing to stop that because I did think that was ridiculous. When it comes to composite, you have 4 curved rails up there. Each curved rail section on there is $1,700 a piece. There's literally nothing I can do about that. That is what Intex charges. So far, that's the one that I see is the best composite to use. When you're talking about the rail system, one of the oak rails, to get it to where it can bend is about $600 a piece. So you're looking at $15,000 and thinking that's a lot. Yet, I mean, people pay $60,000 for a car that only seats 2 people. So it's really not that bad.
And they actually bend that rail instead of cutting it out of wide wood?
Yes, we'll bend
okay.
it. Actually, it's a pretty neat trick. It's an old trick. Actually, you probably should know this. What you do is take that rail and you rip it down into 3/8 sections so it bends. Then you have to glue it. You have to sand it down. You have to stain it or paint it. I believe we've decided to paint it just to match the building. Mm-hmm. That's replacing all the columns. If you go out there and lean on the rail, especially if you come up the steps to the left, that curved rail on the left, I guarantee if you were to go over there and lean on it, it would fall. It is literally crumbling in your hands to touch it. It's actually pretty sad. So it does need to be fixed. I heard you talking that it's not structural, that it's cosmetic. It is structural. I think the mayor said once the post rot, then you're in fear of your porch collapsing. If you did have people come in for commerce or whatnot, or they had a meeting at town hall and they're up there just sitting there leaning against the rail, you do have a safety issue. If you ever sold the building, you'd never be able to sell it. They wouldn't allow that. You would have to fix it, repair it to even get it. So your building codes in the town of Irmo are actually against town hall. So, and don't get me wrong, I mean, it lasted 29 years and it was great, but 29 years ago, it wasn't that big of an issue. Now we have to be specific. You can only have 3.5 inches in between each picket because they're in fear of a child getting their head stuck. Back when I was a kid, we just didn't stick our head into picket. But if you have any other questions.
Or you did it once and your
different. Head's a little crooked now, but that's okay.
The composite.
Yes, sir.
I'll ask you 2 different things. How long do you think it lasts? And if you had to swear on a Bible and sign it, how long would you put down?
I was actually currently, when y'all start talking about it, I was actually on Intech's website trying to find the warranties on it. Most of these companies do offer a very high warranty. Here's your issue with warranties. Shingles. Shingles say, we'll give you, and I don't know if you notice this now, but they don't even offer a 50-year shingle anymore. They call it a lifetime. But what's a lifetime? All right, the shingles are made in Missouri, most of them. Missouri has low humidity, low heat. It's hot a month out of the year. So in there, where it's made, that shingle might last 20 years, as it says on the package. In South Carolina, it's not. It's going to last 15 years. If you're lucky, you'll get 20 years out of it. But we're just in a different environment. It's hot here. I mean, I was working today in short breeches and no shirt. I mean, it's hot in February. So I can't say Intex. I know we put a lot of composite rail up, and we've had pretty good success. We've never had callbacks. I have used Trex rail before that I actually went back on a job. One of the references was John Cates from BMC. We went back to do a job turnkey for him that one of the other subcontractors messed up, and the Trex rail was just a nightmare. We've talked several people out of that. The Intex seems to be pretty good. Everything that I've seen, I have not installed it personally myself, but everything that I've read, and I've done some, per Bob Brown, he wanted me to do a lot of research on it and try to get it. Any information I could find on it. So it seems to be pretty good. Like I said, it comes from up north, and the reason that it was, the owner made it was because they were tired of fighting the weather up north, stuff rotting, not finding anything that they could use that historically correct. So they went in and made this product. So you get a PVC rail, it's got aluminum I-beams in them, so you can't bend them. But they're PVC. They're eventually going to dry rot, as you said. If you would like, I could do a little bit more studying on the Intex and see what their warranties are. I couldn't find it on quick notice, but I'm currently trying to find out what their warranties are.
Well, if the paint or the wood lasted 28 years last time, do you think the Intex is going to last 50 years or 40 or?
If I had to guess, I would say 50 years. But then again, my grandmother has a 100-year-old house. It's got the same wood on it for 100 years. And it hadn't rotted because they paint it all the time. And it's on the coast. So, I mean, it's just a matter of
maintenance.
Yep.
When you're talking about siding, masonite siding rotted. It was a pretty good product, but nobody installed it right, so it all rotted. So it just depends. And the way they make paint now, we go to Sherwin-Williams. We use nothing but Sherwin-Williams paint. And they've made great strides in their Emerald series. They've got Super Paint series, all these that they supply warranties on. So if you paint something out of wood and it fails, as long as you're within their, I guess, code, they come back and they'll cover it under warranty because they stand behind their products. Yes. So you got a 50-50 shot. You're looking at $27,000, $15,000, that's basically half. So you're either going to get 28 years or I'd say 50 years. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Any more questions?
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you.
I know we got the 15,000 there. We can do two things. We can approve one or the other, or we can say, if somebody wants to do the 28,000 Intex, we can amend it to that and vote on that, or we can say we're going to tell Bob to spend the 15,500, but if the Intex will last 50 years, go that, and leave it up to him to make that decision if we want to do it that way. But, or we can just choose one or the other.
Well, after hearing Mr. Johnson and us discussing it, I would think that the wood is the way to go. And that's because we are going to take care of it. We're going to make sure that it's maintained. Why? Because it is the town hall. We're not going to let it go downhill. So, yeah, I would say that's probably the best way to go.
So we're at 15,510 right now. Any more discussion? All in favor then of awarding it to Stephen Johnson Construction in the amount of 15,510, do so with show of hands. All opposed? Next is presentation by citizens. This is where anyone who would like to address council on anything may do so at this time. All we ask is you give us your name and address for the record. Seeing none. Discussions. We have a discussion on here about the rental ordinance, and I was thinking somewhere.
It was in our packets.
Yeah, I'm looking. Oh, here it is. Nope. Well, Bob, I don't think I have a copy of that.
It's in front. It's on the screen.
Oh, okay. What I did was go through the one that was on the books now and went through every section until I got to stuff that I felt like we may need to change. And I wanted to put it on here for us to talk about, and then we can keep stuff, delete stuff, change stuff, add stuff, take it off, whatever. And then whatever we end up with, then Bob can put that into ordinance form for the next meeting. First thing up there, right now our license fee, I think, is $50 for the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one. We do have an exception in there that if you own the home and then you move out and rent it instead of selling it, you don't pay that business license if you were actually the owner. So if somebody owns a home and they're not necessarily an investor, then they don't have to pay that. They still have to get the permit and do all that stuff. They just don't have to pay. What this change would do is make it a $200, and I just chose that number. Didn't want to get too high, but I kind of felt like it should be more because if somebody's paying the $50 and it's not going to cost them any more, any less, they may take a chance and say, hey, it doesn't matter, I'm going to just wait. If it's $200, if they wait, if they get it up front, then it's half of that. So it'd be $100 for the first one, $50 for each additional one after that. So it kind of gives them incentive to go ahead and come in up front and get the thing instead of trying to sneak by and not get it.
Say it again.
If they say like you buy a rental home or something like that, if you come into the town before you rent the thing out and say, I want to get a license to rent my rental home, it'd actually be, instead of the $200, it'd be half of that, so it'd be $100. If you don't get the thing and you rent the house out and we catch you and find out and you come into the town and get it, then it's $200. So it's like a $100 penalty for not getting it up front. But instead of doing it the other way around where you got to penalize them, you just charge them up front and get them a discount. So that's the first change. And then the parking spaces, I think right now it just says driveways must be paid. And I kind of had some people say something about that, inferring that it just had to be asphalt. So I thought, well, we'll just clarify that and say concrete or asphalt. And right now I think it says something about you can have a driveway for every car, which in my mind has been a little bit confusing. So I wanted to change it that if they have a single width driveway and they don't want to do anything to it and they buy the house for rental home, then they can only rent it to somebody with 2 cars. That keeps them off the grass. That kind of handles part of that problem. And it's up to the landlord to handle that. If they've got a double wide driveway or whatever, then they can do 4 cars as long as it meets those requirements. So that will kind of handle some of the stuff of the rental homes, people renting them, and then there's not enough driveway and all that. We're just going to kind of say if you got a small driveway, it's 2 cars. If you got a bigger driveway, it's 4. If you want to rent it out to somebody else more, then you can put a concrete driveway down. But I think it's just a little bit clearer. Changing the grass height from 12 inches, which is what's on there now, to 6 inches. And then we just recently did something on the commercial buffering. If someone's building a building, we require that buffering, and we changed that not too long ago. We also require them to put in a landscape plan, and we also require them to put in a, the watering system to keep it alive. This doesn't go to that extreme, but it also just says they got to keep grass on the lawn. And if they're going to do a rental home, kind of like a business, you got to put in a landscape requirement. You got to meet our landscape requirement. This is a business. You're going to do the same thing at that house. And if you don't want to do that, then don't rent it out or buy it for rental, sell it. The other thing on the siding just says extend the second sentence by adding, I think it just says right now the wood can't be peeling, rotting, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to change that to say that it must be properly painted with no peeling paint. Boats and RVs, right now basically someone could be renting a home, put a boat and RV there, and then got it in the driveway and got no room to park the cars. This would just eliminate that. If you got a rental home and you got a boat and RV, park it somewhere else but not there. Then your driveway is free for cars. It also allows for somebody that's got a boat or an RV or a camper or whatever that are getting ready to go camping and they want to load and unload or they want to wash it or clean it up or do whatever, minor repairs, then they can park it there at the house in the driveway while they work on it. if they just come in to unload or let whatever, they can park it in the road, for no more than 36 hours while they unload, load, get ready to go on the trip, whatever. And then there were two more things that we didn't have before. It ended with 19 before, that in a single-family residential neighborhood, if you're buying a rental home, then you can only have a single-family resident living there. And no more than 8 people, and I just chose that number, kind of 3 in one bedroom, 3 in another bedroom, and 2 in the parents' bedroom, just to have some number to start with, that no more than 8 people can live in any residential rental. And then the last thing has to do with the sewer services, that any residential dwelling, the responsibility of the property owner to make sure all that stuff's hooked up. Even though we can charge the tenant, but it's still their responsibility to make sure it stays hooked up, so that we can go back to them at any time and say, hey, you got a rental home, we got a letter here, you need to go check, we're going to write you a ticket, you need to fix this, and then kind of get them more involved into that process. But that was the changes that, just going through that, I felt like needed to be a little bit more clarified and would help address some of that parking in the yard and some of the other stuff as well. But that was just where we can start. And then at some point, we need to add to that, take this stuff off, merge it, whatever, and then let Bob know to put it in ordinance form by the next meeting. So I just wanted to kind of see where everybody else stood and what and they may think of something else that I ain't thought of, but kind of see what anybody else thinks.
Well, you're going to have the police department now having to decide if it's rental property or homeowner property about the grass and the boats and the RVs and campers, travel trailers. 6 inches isn't very tall. Some grass you don't cut it any lower than 4 inches. I mean, this is a 6-inch tall pin.
Right.
So.
Well, most grass is actually.
And you shouldn't cut more than 2 inches of the grass anyway.
But St. Augustine is the only one that's really a tall grass, and it really shouldn't be any more than 4. So most grasses, centipedes and stuff, are normally a short grass. Even Bermuda's a pretty short grass. But that was just something to go because 12 inches is way too much.
Yeah,
I think our
way too much.
town stuff says 8, which to me is still
Tall.
Somebody's got 8 inches, then that's really. But with a rental home, I think you can tell that landlord they got to be a little bit more involved in that and let their tenants know that you got to do a little bit more jiffy. And this doesn't have to be approved. It's just there for discussion, and then let Bob know what we need to do.
Well, as far as boats and RVs, I think if they put them in their backyards and not in the front, and they're not on the driveway, got no problem with that. Because if you're restricting who you can rent it to now.
Yeah, I mean, you're kind of forcing the landlord to be a little bit more.
Well, the landlord needs to be involved, yes. I mean, I understand from some of our recent occurrences in the town with illicit discharge, some property owners haven't been in their rental property or seen their rental property for 3 years. And I find that to be really strange. When I rented my old house out, I used to go by and have a surprise inspection at least every 3 months just to see what's going on. Now, I don't find any fault with anything else, especially the one about the utilities. I think that the property owner should be, well, I know water meters are in the property owner's name, or at least in the city of Columbia they are. And it's the sewer system in Irmo. We've got 3 different providers of sewer service, and we've got 2 providers of water. And if you're on a different water system than the sewer system, and the sewer system is cut off and the person's still getting water, they assume they still have sewer. At least that's been the impression I've gotten from some of the people that, well, I didn't know.
And I think actually some of them probably don't.
Well,
mean, you go get it,
the landlord probably didn't make it clear.
yeah, or you go get your water cut on and everything works and you're happy. Until somebody tells you they're gonna plug it or something.
But with these illicit discharges in the storm water system, talking about the EPA getting involved, the town of Irmo could stand to be fined in the millions of dollars if we don't make a correction or show that we are trying to correct it.
Well, do you want to make some changes to that boat and RV thing about the backyard and that kind of stuff now, or you just want to send it to Bob? And
well, that's just my feelings. Let's see what Mr. Walker and Mr. Pouliot think about this. I mean, I think you're limiting who you're going to rent the house to, and you're penalizing somebody that rents a house and has a boat.
Anybody else?
I think most of the problems that we've had with properties are rentals. So this certainly helps. It helps get the landlords more involved and keep them involved. I think that's an important aspect of this.
Well, why don't we just if you want to make some changes to that, write them to Bob and give them to Bob, and then we can have it on there.
Well, that's the only thing I would change is they can have boats in RVs or campers, but they must be in the backyard.
Okay. And what about the 6 inches on the grass? Leave it 6 or do 8?
I think just make it the uniform for the whole town, 8 inches, which is what it is now.
That's fine.
I mean, 8
It
inches.
makes it easier. It makes it easier
Change
for,
it to
for
6
code
and 8
for
on the grass.
code enforcement.
Yep.
But other than that, I think it's a good idea to do this.
And Eric, I wanted to ask on that last sentence, and I know this is probably, when we want to hold the town harmless, yeah, how can we say, if you own this property and they're dumping their sewer and we get a bill from EPA, we're gonna send it to you? Is that possible? But I mean, how can we make it clear that they're responsible if we get hit with a fine? I don't.
Suppose you could put it into your ordinance that it is our intention that should we ever receive a fine because of your bad acts, that we will seek any and all possible legal recourse. But I mean, you can't put an indemnity clause into it. I mean, you can, but it's not going to be enforceable. I also think perhaps you might want to revisit the word hefty in terms of fines. You might want to.
Oh.
You might want to like say that the fine shall be no less than. That's the way we do it in all the state codes, and so for instance, if you have a driving under suspension second, the judge is prohibited by statute from going below this. We can only go back one step. We can't do anything more than that. So I would suggest making that a little bit more definitive and hefty. I have other thoughts, but
So you can do all that?
I told Bob that I would take a closer look at this.
Okay.
And give you my thoughts on some of the things. I mean, occupancy, family is a big issue. Finding what a family is,
But if we put it in here, are we putting I'm gonna call it responsibility on the landlord to, okay, I think I'm renting to 2 families, I can't do that, so I'm gonna just rent it to 1. We're kind of making him to be or her, whoever, to be yeah, and we're not gonna necessarily do anything about it, but if we find out later, we can go back to the landlord and say, hey, you got,
Right. I mean, and that's why I say the landlord needs to have a little bit more than 1 family in a rental home zoned for a single family. Are you only going to rent to families? Are you going to rent to college students? What is a family? 2 guys living together, is that a family? Or is that 2 families? Or is that no family? There's also some constitutional law that I haven't looked up for quite some time. I won't tell how long ago that was, but since I was in law
But that's for the homeowner, though, isn't it?
It's been a long time.
Okay.
I just recall it as a passing thing I had to learn in constitutional law that never came back up in practice. But
I know like Clemson has a thing, but they're a college town too, that in certain areas, you can't rent a home to college students because it's a single-family zone neighborhood. And other places that are zone commercial, neighborhood commercial, who knows what, then you can. We don't have that problem here, so I don't think it's a bigger deal whether two college kids or a couple of them.
I think in terms of occupancy, unless that is your intent, unless your intent is to limit rentals to single families.
Well,
Wait, you saying limit rentals to single family?
It says that no more than one family may live in a rental home zoned single family. Well, again,
What's a family?
what's one family?
Yeah. And I think what I've heard, and this is what I'm trying to address, and I don't know if it's 100% true, half true, all true, what, is that, well, a lot of these homes that have multiple cars are because there's multiple families living in there. Maybe that's true, maybe that's not. But it is a single-family residential neighborhood, so maybe we just say single family can live. I don't know. But you can look at that, and then by the time we get it ready, then you'll say, yeah, we can do that, or no, we can, or
So what's the
whatever.
penalty if you got more than one car or more than two cars?
What the?
Right now, $1,087.50.
If you got more than two cars? Yeah,
Well, you mean right now as we sit, or if it's,
if this passes, right?
it would be $1,087.50 per violation,
If it's a single car driveway.
single car driveway. Correct.
That's ridiculous.
Well, it's actually $500.
Whatever, let's go.
The fine is $500. The state adds $500 to it. We ain't got nothing we can do about that. But the judge could charge $200 too if he wanted to. But
Here we go.
well, yeah, take a look at that and see what's right and wrong and good and reword it. And then, as far as council, we've changed it to aid, and we changed the backing in the yard of RVs and boats. So. Any more discussion? Next is executive session unknown. Next is adjournment. Is there a motion for adjournment?
I second.
All in favor, do so with aye. Aye, 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 aye.
Aye, aye, aye.